Hello, BookTube, and we're here again. And we have a guest, Gareth from Books, Songs, and Other Magic. Had to think there for a second.
Hello.
And the topic tonight is going to be mostly science fiction. And it's going to be about where we started with science fiction, and the odd one out here, we're going to find out why he hasn't started with science fiction yet.
So what's that about?
I was going to say, if you kept it as where we start with science fiction, I only need to be here 5 minutes. And hi, everyone, by the way.
We did have one, and then they've disappeared.
Well, as in one?
There's no one watching it.
Like,
no, there's no one watching it.
Oh, see, one, as in one.
Yeah.
Upstairs rather than get dirty.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Gareth's mum.
Who's that?
Say,
Mom.
oh, I think she's going to come on camera. You're going to come, you're going to wave?
Not Louis, is it?
No, it's not Louis.
Gonna look like him, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which one? This one or this
Yeah,
one?
you know.
Me.
No, it's not, no.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, brilliant.
All right, see you later.
Bye.
I definitely titled this one correctly from a dimension, another dimension near you.
Yeah.
And
I'm hoping Louis is a devastatingly handsome,
oh,
wonderful person, of course. Yeah.
He's my son.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. I suppose I do look so youthful that I could, of course.
You look 21.
well, that beats Steve.
Yeah. Hey, Starshot.
This is cool because it'd be nice if people comment about how they got into science fiction as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah. We'll have to reiterate that, I guess, occasionally, because there's only a couple people here now. I guess it's Scott.
Does Scott mean he will join?
He's going to join us. Yeah.
Wonderful.
And he's going to join us mobilely. He's going to be mobile.
Nice.
Wonderful.
So, it's not a pub this time, but it's a traveling. It's going to be a traveling one.
Yeah, I need to sort out the pub one. I'm determined to do that one day. Join in from the pub. People around me.
You could get random people on camera, like what just happened just then.
Well, couldn't see her, unfortunately, because it's such a narrow field. But
Well, and she might have thought she was on camera, being all the way over there as well.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Need a 360 camera.
No, you don't.
Fisheye lens.
Does your mum subscribe to you as well, though, Gareth? Or?
Only because I did it from her computer.
Yeah. I was surprised how long it took me to actually get my dad to subscribe to me. My mum did it straight away, of course, but I was looking through a thing and I was like, "Not subscribed to me." He's like, "Oh, haven't I? Oh, oops."
Just basic, isn't it? It's like, come on.
Yeah. Oh dear. What is it? What does your cup say? Fancy brew?
Oh, because clearly it's not my house, because it would be like some science fiction thing, but it's just fancy a brew. It just says fancy a brew.
Oh, fancy a brew. I didn't see the ass. I was like, what's a fancy brew?
Fancy brew.
Yeah, well, as you know, I guess in the U.S. that would be fancy a beer rather than a tea. And we had a nice conversation about tea as well. I'm a connoisseur, and the sewer part is in the middle.
Yeah, we definitely differ. I like your normal tea bag from a big company like Tetley, and Sean likes to faff about and mess around with tea leaves and all sorts of that, and do something really posh. So
yeah, all of a sudden your sound is gone now again.
Has it actually gone?
Yeah,
well, it's like a Dalek.
Yeah.
Appropriately enough, it's like a Dalek. So
that is weird. Okay, well in that case, it's not my house's fault. Is it back?
No, it's still quite
Did you move something? Is your mobile near the computer?
No, I don't know why it does that.
It's weird.
So shall I come out and come back in again?
Yeah, try that, and we'll see. Yeah, Starshot's
This is the test to see if you want me back.
Yeah, quick, lock him out. Yeah, Scott's what is YouTube?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I have to say, my parents have been fairly good at kind of embracing the technology, even if they don't use it necessarily the right way. Or sometimes there's what I consider to be obviously small problems tend to become quite big problems, and I have to fix it. And of course, it is easy. But but the thing is, I'm still, I'm not that young in terms of having it as like a second nature to me in how to use the technology as well. So, but I do find Google indispensable when it comes to like looking at problems, and then I think you can fix it because you just get the instructions how to do. Oh, he's back. Stop talking about him now. Yeah. What's the T-shirt, Gareth? It looks really good.
It's one of my many Muppet T-shirts. So
I love the Muppets.
This is actually tons of characters.
Yeah, I can see Beaker and
the
Professor.
Honeydew. There's Statler and Waldorf.
Yeah.
New Zealand. There. Yeah, the one that. You can't see it, can you? The one that flings fish. But yeah,
and there's
quite cool.
Animal as well, isn't there?
Animals there. I do.
Yeah, Animal's cool. Animal's cool.
A lot of people say that you either get people saying that Animal's their favorite, or some people say Beaker's their favorite.
I actually like Wardorf and the two old buggers. I've always liked them. Heckling. I always liked them.
My favorite, like Ralph the dog.
Yeah, Rolf.
It's why I named the dog Ralph.
I quite like is he an eagle?
Sam the Eagle.
Sam the Eagle, yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't like. He always moans that think they've gone too off piste and all that. Yeah. It's magical.
But it always cracks me up, like when you realize. I mean, obviously we all know it now, but I think some other people come to it later. When you realize that Miss Piggy and Yoda are the same person, it does kind of spoil Yoda a little bit sometimes.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
It's Frank Oz. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, next time you see it, you'll notice the voice. You go, "How did I not see that before?"
Kermit. I'll see Miss Piggy much more before I would ever see Yoda.
All right. Well, if you're a Muppet fan, that's cool. I'm personally a big Star Wars fan as well. Yoda's really
two strikes. That doesn't know good tea when he sees it, and likes Star Wars. Like next thing you're gonna say you like Star Trek.
I love Star Trek.
Well, that's three.
Yeah, get him off, kick him out.
Well, I mean, when we talk about how we got into science fiction, it was TV. For me, I was into science fiction when I was really little. Really little. So I think I was the ideal age for Star Wars because I was 6 when it came out. So it just blew me away. And I had Star Wars bed sheets, wallpaper, all over the place. It was stationery. I had, I was just absolutely obsessed with it. And that was when I was really. I mean, that's very small, very impressionable, being 6 years old. So you can't blame me, Sean. When you've got this huge thing happening in front of me, and I'm going, this is amazing. And then, and end up getting really into all sorts of things, and 80s TV had loads of science fiction on it. I was thinking about it earlier because I knew I was going to have this conversation. And I was thinking about the original Battlestar Galactica, there's Star Trek, obviously. You've got Blake Seven. I was a massive Blake Seven fan. That's kind of like the golden years of Doctor Who as well. And I was really into Doctor Who. So much stuff that was.
Who was your doctor?
So I started watching the Doctor during the Tom Baker years.
Okay.
but I think Peter Davison's like my doctor because that's when I watched every single episode and got really into it.
Kristen.
Yeah,
He's a George Orwell scholar, don't you?
Who, Peter Davison?
Yeah.
Is he? No, I've lost it. No, okay, I didn't see the reference.
You'll see. He's going to show you.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Amazing.
Yeah,
Tristan in All Creatures Great and Small, Doctor Who, and a George Orwell scholar.
Yeah, absolutely.
But sadly, he just passed away just over a month ago.
Not the Doctor Who, Peter Davison.
Yeah, the
Just
scholar.
confuse people like mad.
I
Here we
know.
go. Yeah.
You see, I missed a lot of that stuff because, in the 80s, I was living in Bermuda, and all my TV was American, pretty much. Well, actually, the early years of my TV, we only had one station, and when I used to come home from school, they used to have just what did they have? They would have like just as I was getting home from school, this American soap opera called As the World Turns would be ending, and then you would get something called And Now a Date in History, which would be like a 15-minute program, which would give you what happened on that day, whatever. And then it would be the old 1950s black and white Robin Hood with Richard Green.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
But I loved it. To me, for those early years, like my first few years of school, I'd come back and I'd get so excited doing the Robin Hood, riding, oh, I forgot this is live.
They just started repeating that on my TV, so I get it. I can't remember what channel it is. There's like an old timey kind of channel, and they've just started showing those Richard Green Robin Hoods. So I'd never seen it before, so I've got them recorded to watch. They've also started playing the Outer Limits as well, the original Outer Limits, which is quite cool. But yeah, no, it's cool. And actually, you say that, and the massive thing for me. So this is a little bit older, so I would have been about 12, I think. But I absolutely loved it. It's one of my favourite all-time shows was Robin of Sherwood.
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was brilliant. But they changed the Robin, didn't they?
Yeah, they did.
Sean Connery's son. Yeah, Sean Connery's son over.
Yeah.
It
was really quite dark, if I remember rightly. It was really quite haunting. It was
In every episode you had Ray Winston go, "Can I kill him, Robin? Can I kill him? I want to kill him." And he'd go, "No."
Yeah, Ray Winston. I forgot he was in that.
Scott making a comment about your sound again.
Is it happening again?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh, that's frustrating. I'll have to be a Dalek. I can't keep nipping in and out. I'll have to be a Dalek.
It probably will fix itself in a bit, but
Yeah, well, we'll give it a try. Yeah, to see.
I'm just trying to think about what's his name, Ray Winston. Going like that sheriff from Nottingham is a right.
Yeah, it was pretty. I mean, it wasn't like gritty, but for the time, I think it was. They were quite happy to have unhappy endings and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, I was young, so I probably found it grittier. I mean, I was born in 1980, so for me, I was probably like 6, 7 when it came out. 86, 87, wasn't it? Probably.
Yeah.
Can I stop? We're supposed to be talking about science fiction, not fantasy.
What do you mean fantasy? It's real history, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, going back to what I was going to say was I didn't really have anything on Sundays. I would have only Star Trek, the original Star Trek would be repeated, and I used to watch that. See, when you mentioned all these shows and things, I started to realize that I did watch a lot of science fiction. I watched it either as television shows or 80s films, things like Flight of the Navigator. I don't know if War Games counts as science fiction. Yeah. I'm trying to remember this kind of stuff. I remember a terrible. What the hell? What was it called? It was a terrible film. I'm sure it was Disney, but it was from the late 70s, probably.
The Black Hole.
Black Hole. Yeah, but I liked it.
Terrible. It's not terrible. It's actually quite a good film.
Yeah, I liked it, but when you see it now, it just looks so dated or so like
I think
really
because it's got a reputation of being not particularly good, and I think it's because the pacing's wrong. You know, because I think people would forgive the effects, but I think there's just not a lot happening in it. And I think at that point, pacing had changed in films.
Just bash your computer a little bit where the microphone is. It sounds like a loose. Try again. Okay.
Do you reckon that's worked?
No.
No, it's probably worse.
I'll be amazed.
But it clearly made the thing. Try it once. Just try it once. Try tapping it once. No.
Oh yeah, I just did it about 4 times.
Yeah.
No, do it do it an odd number of times.
I don't take instructions very well. I'm like a rebel. So Robin Hood didn't Robin show into when I was a kid. I turned into a rebel. I've actually, this is my iPad that I use at work. I need to get, I've got a new one. There's a whole bunch of reasons why I haven't switched, but I'll get to that one day maybe. But I was going to mention V, the series V.
Yeah, I remember that one.
I've heard of it. I don't think I watched it. No.
I watched it. Yeah.
We used to talk about it in the playground and at school. We used to go, "Did you watch it?"
Is it V like the V for Vendetta thing?
It's the letter V, but it's about it's like V for Victory. It's about an alien invasion.
Oh, okay.
And it's like a big allegory about the Nazis, really. But yeah, it was massively cheesy because there was like lots of heroic moments where the main character would stare at the sky and say, "I've got to do something about this," and all that. But I loved it, absolutely loved it when I was a kid. But yeah, you know, I was sort of set up for life. Once I started reading, I was like, what wanted to read because I was watching it on TV and all that.
Yeah, I think yeah, V I remember watching, and I liked it, but I thought it was a bit cheesy at the time. But again, I was older, but for me, that got like again, it was visual too, but it was Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I used to watch that.
What's the other one that we talked about?
Outer Limits.
Outer Limits.
Outer Limits, yeah, and the 50s schlock science fiction films. You know, the stuff from the 50s, and to me, science fiction was black and white. You know. And then even when I started watching Star Trek, it was, and I watched Star Trek and the reruns, and I did enjoy them. And but then I remember I never saw Star Wars until sometime in the 80s because we were so far away. But when I did finally see it, I just went, I waited this long? Why? But anyway, I really liked. Even though how bad it was made, I liked the original Battlestar Galactica. I really liked the storyline of it and the history, the mythology that was in it. And that, to me, then all of a sudden, I sort of started distancing myself away from Star Trek because of that. Because there was more story, I thought, to it than the Star Trek, even though there were some really good episodes.
Well, Battlestar Galactica put you off Star Trek. That's amazing.
Yeah, not put me off, but it just sort of, at that time, I was, when that came out, that was like 1976, 77, I think, or 70, 78. It was late 70s, so I would have been early teenager, and then that's where I really started getting into reading a lot more science fiction. And then Star Trek just didn't hold any interest to me. But as Star Shot says, like, but Star Trek does, and even the TNG Next Generation has gotten a lot of people, or Doctor Who.
But well, I think the Next Generation made it explode. I mean, it was Star Trek wasn't even that popular when it first came out, and then it kind of got more and more popular with reruns and then the films. But when the Next Generation came out, it became mainstream basically. Next Generation was really popular, and for the right reasons. I mean, it did definitely develop what the original Star Trek started. Just from the point of view, even the basic thing of the original series being pretty much about 3 people, and the Next Generation was about 8 people. Something simple as that. That was quite an important change. And then DS9 made it about 50 people.
I don't know why I didn't really watch it. you know, I did enjoy like the original Star Trek as a small kid. You know, it was my little ritual. I can't remember which was on first. It was either Star Trek followed by, I think it must have been another Jim Henson production, the Fraggle Rock. Did you ever see that?
Did I ever see that? I'm obsessed with the man. Of course I did.
Yeah, but I can't remember. It was one way or the other. It was either Fraggle Rock followed by Star Trek. But that's what I used to watch every Sunday. And when The Next Generation came out, I don't even remember trying to watch it. The only time I really remember it on was because I went to boarding school. There would be the hardcore group that would occupy the television when it was on BBC Two or whatever, or Channel 4. I can't remember what channel it was on, but they would watch it, and I would sometimes sit through a couple of episodes. But yeah, it's a bizarre. My relationship with science fiction is really bizarre because it's something I should really like, and I do like pretty much every interaction I've ever had with it. But it's never sucked me in like other things. You know what I mean? It's never become.
Never proper fall in love with it.
That's it. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I have started watching. I did start watching. I haven't watched it in a few weeks, but I did start watching Next Generation from the beginning. But I'm only like three episodes in because it's now on Netflix, maybe. Here, it's not always the same in each country, but I think in the Czech Republic it's either Netflix or Prime. No, I think it's Netflix.
I wish Paramount Plus didn't take lots of Star Trek away from us because it's just a shame that you have to get these millions of streaming services to get what you want to watch now. It's a shame. But talking about, I know we're sort of flipping between different things, but you mentioned the Twilight Zone, and obviously you guys know because I've done videos on it that I'm huge obsessive about Twilight Zone as well, and that's been a big deal for me. But I only discovered Twilight Zone a bit later, so more like when I was about 12, 13. So I was trying to think about the earliest forms of science fiction I had when I was really little. But when I was 12, 13, I mean, and then I guess that's why I was more up for the adult themes that are in it and that kind of thing. But Twilight Zone was such a major thing for me.
My first experience of the Twilight Zone, again, would have been the 80s, but it was the the first I ever watched wasn't the series, it was the film. Which was, I guess, was kind of just an anthology, really, wasn't it? It was like different stories in the film. Because I remember, of course, in the film, it's got the gremlin on the wing, hasn't it? And the guy sitting there, and then there's like, I always remember the Creedence song "Midnight Special" playing in one of the, I think maybe the beginning of it. And
it's in the prologue, yeah. Do you want to see something scary? Yeah, Dan.
Yeah.
It's I think it's a really good film. It's underrated, and I think part of it is that they didn't really talk about it a lot because of the helicopter crash that killed the actors, and I think that ended up being more about what people spoke about rather than the quality of the film. I think
I didn't know that. That's terrible.
Yeah. It's Jennifer Jason Leigh's dad that died. The guy who played the main character in the first story. Yeah, so she won work with people because of what happened, and she blames John Landis and all that. But yeah, it was a horrific accident. It killed some of the Vietnamese actors that were in that scene as well. Children. So yeah, it was awful.
Oh, it's horrible.
Yeah, that's the thing. I remember that, and I remember watching it later. But yeah, was it Dave? Is it David Jason? Was it or
what do you mean?
Frost
from Combat. From Combat, that was in that scene. The one that got his head lopped off.
No, Vic Morrow.
Vic Morrow. Yeah, that's it. Sorry. Yes. But yeah, that's what I remember about that film, basically. And you mentioned the Gremlin one. Have you ever seen the original one with Captain Kirk? Oh, you want to see bad acting? You watch that episode.
That's written by Richard Matheson.
Yeah, it's a good story, but it's just he's just a horrible actor from beginning to to end.
William Shatner, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's the Shat.
I suppose the defining science fiction part of my life was, during the early 90s, was the X-Files.
Oh, okay.
It was massive. It was what actually the science fiction I used to watch would have been the X-Files, Red Dwarf, because it was all on when I was a kid and people would talk about it at school. Because I'd just come back. I came back to England in 1993, and when I started at school, the kids would be telling me what to watch, basically. So I got into that, and I thought they were great. You see, this is it. I did really enjoy these things. I used to actually see. I did have the Red Dwarf Omnibus, which I read as well. So actually, my science fiction is growing the more I think about it. And I remember they brought out, because I didn't realize it existed as a television series before, was they brought out The Outer Limits at some point, I think to the mid to late 90s. But I didn't realize it was like what do they call it? A reboot. So I was just curious if you've seen the newer one, Gareth, from the 90s.
Outer Limits.
Yeah, and how does it compare to the older one? I know Sean's answer. I don't even have to ask his opinion. He's good crap.
Well, like anything, the things from the 50s and 60s had a particular pace, and that quickened up in the 80s and the 90s. So it's a little bit more tense, I guess. But the original stories, were, some of them were amazing, and obviously you got things like the two that were written by Hal Ellison are in the original series. There's some really interesting acting in there, like Leonard Nimoy and David McCullum and people like that in the original Outer Limits as well. But yeah, I was really impressed with the is it 80s or 90s? The early 90s maybe.
90s, yeah. I think it was mid 90s, because I thought the X-Files had already started, and then it was another thing they brought on BBC Two as they were kind of touting.
Didn't Straczynski, J. Michael Straczynski, write an episode, I think, and also too, what's his name was in it? What's his name? The actor, Sheridan.
We might need more information than that, John.
Captain Sheridan. That's what
Bruce Boxleitner.
Yeah, Boxleitner. Yeah, and he was in one episode, I think, as well.
Well, he's
Hi, Jason.
80s Twilight Zone, hadn't he? So the 80s Twilight Zone, JMS had a lot to do with that. He's one of the main producers.
Oh, actually, yeah, he did. But maybe it was in the 80s Twilight Zone that he was in an episode.
Yeah, probably. Yeah,
it might have been. Yeah, it might have been. Yeah.
But because I wasn't going to say it yet, but that at the same time as the X-Files, that other program that we were almost talking about was on as well.
Yeah. Well, see, this is the thing. I really loved Babylon 5. We'll get it out there. But see, X-Files, I think I was way too old for it. If I was 9 or 10 years old, I know for a fact I would have loved X-Files. But
I don't think the target audience was 9 and 10-year-olds. So there's much more dark and kind of.
Yeah, but I like, to me, I would have loved it at 9 or 10 years old. But any older, I don't think I would have liked it.
I watched the first season of X-Files religiously, and then I felt like I was watching the same episode over and over again, so I stopped. But people around me absolutely loved it. It was huge.
Hey,
Scott.
Hello.
Hi. Are you being driven around in the back of the car by a chauffeur, or?
Becky's driving.
I know. I just.
Are you driving?
No, Becky's driving. I rarely drive.
Hey, okay, it's a truck. I thought you were sitting in the back, Scott, being driven, like driving Miss Daisy or something.
That took a minute.
Yeah, there might be a bit of a delay for them. It looks like. Can you hear it?
Oh, we lost them.
Oh, lost them.
Because we kind of like mentioned loads and loads of TV shows, and when we talked about Star Wars, because I was really little when Star Wars happened, and if you think about, a lot of people, what they love about science fiction is aliens and robots, yeah. And my two favorite characters in the whole of Star Wars universe is Yoda, who we've already mentioned, fantastic alien, and R2D2. I was so besotted with R2D2, and he's such an awesome robot, droid, and that just sets you up for just loving the whole concept of artificial intelligence.
So was R2D2 more popular than CP3O?
Oh, he must be.
C3PO.
C3PO. C3PO is
That's what I said, didn't I? What did I say?
CP3O.
Oh, okay.
Jesus, get with the program, man. Oh my God, you're so square.
Yeah, no,
It's
I think
Star
most
Wars,
people
so
absolutely
it's
love
foreign.
that. I think it's quite common.
Oh, he's annoying though. C3PO is annoying. I mean, the only thing that out annoyed him was when that the first Star Wars came out, and you had that Jar Jar Binks thing.
C3PO is deliberately annoying, right? I mean, that's
yeah.
And it kind of creates tension in the script, and it's fine. But I think everyone that was making the films, and they just knew that R2D2 was going to be really endearing, and everyone would love him. And it's basically the dog, it's Luke's dog, and any kind of dog-like character is going to be popular. Same
Well, they
as,
had a robotic dog on the original Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they were too scared to actually have a robot, but they were going to make it a dog. But yeah, no, you're right. I mean, anything like that, and people love it, and I loved it when I was a kid. And I think that robots have got
what
some great...
Jason says.
Marvin, yeah, life.
I don't know.
About life.
I always liked Joan Rivers from Spaceballs.
I think Joan Rivers has always seemed a bit like a robot, anyway.
Spaceballs, though, it was fun, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah. I think High Anxiety and the
Pizza the Hut.
Blazing Saddles are better.
Oh no, Edmund Don't Wear Plaid is the best.
That's not the same people.
That's
Mel Brooks, isn't it? No, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid isn't, but
no, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid is Carl Reiner and Steve Martin.
I thought Mel Brooks had something to do with that too. I don't know. I liked it anyway.
Yeah, it was great. We were opening
another door. All right, yeah.
But I suppose, should we talk about what we read first? Because we talk a lot about
Canine.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think I can't remember what the first science fiction thing I read, but I do remember very early reading Edgar Rice Burroughs, The Princess of Mars, The Barsoom, Tarzan, and then just other ones like getting old magazines and just reading stuff and not knowing what authors there were at the time. And this is sort of early mid 70s, reading a little bit, but I didn't really start reading a lot until probably late 70s, early 80s. And then I started reading quite a bit, and I just devoured anything I got of science fiction.
Yeah, I think maybe that's why it stays with you so much, because I think with any kind of art form, the stuff you liked as a teenager is stuff you like when you're later on in life. Do you know what I mean?
Well, that's why.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, that's why some people say the golden age, like or I forget who actually originally said it. It was some science fiction writer that the golden age of science fiction is between.
Clifford D. Semick, maybe.
No, he would not have said that. What he did say about Star Wars, though, which I will say, in an interview, and I think about 1980, he went to see it, and he came out with his wife and said to his wife, this is going to harm science fiction, basically, because people are going to think that's science fiction, and then say, I want nothing to do with it.
Well, Star Wars is one of the not the only thing, but one of the things that's made science fiction mainstream now.
Oh, it has, yeah.
So it is a lot easier to access and enjoy science fiction now.
But he's right in the sense that people see this thing that I wanted to get to this earlier, but we got off track, was a little bit of the thing of there's people that love watching science fiction, and or what I would almost term sci-fi, like Star Wars and that kind of thing. But they would never read it. They will not read science fiction, and like I do understand his sentiment of that. I know that Star Wars is so influential, but it has sort of hurt good, like, I mean, really good science fiction, because see, that took science fiction back 50 years. Star Wars, it took it back to the late 20s,
to
where
like to the nonsense like Edgar Rice Burroughs.
a bit, yeah, but more to not that far back. It took it back to the late 20s, like Doc Smith, the super science, the pure space opera without much story in it all, with a little bit of a story tacked on to it. But let's just before we move on there.
The first trilogy of Star Wars is all full of archetypes, isn't it? So it's they're all kind of, you know, the sort of stories of legend, really, isn't it? Like the princess has to be rescued, and the heroic.
That's exactly what the early science fiction was. The super science stuff. That's exactly all that stuff. But they didn't have somebody to say, oh, I got this from Campbell, not John W. Campbell, but somebody else.
But it's also that's popular because obviously that resonates with people, because it is like your literal kind of like sort of folk story kind of.
Well, it is. It's like that kind of thing went off, like the super science stuff in the late 20s and 30s. It went off into two things, and that's like it went to like Superman comic stuff, the superhero stuff, and then it was the pure space opera stuff sort of stayed, and then John W. Campbell, the editor, sort of he reformed science fiction, and then it was reformed again in the 50s. Then it was reformed again with the new wave. But then, as I say, the Star Wars, though, took it back 50 years.
Yeah, but like I always say, because I always say this to my music students as well, when I talk about different genres of music that have happened, nothing ever goes away. So when rock and roll was invented, there were still country bands around, there were still blues bands around, there were still jazz bands around. Nowadays, there are still rock and roll bands around doing stuff from the late 50s. Do you know what I mean? Nothing goes away in the same.
Oh no, it doesn't go away. Yeah. But what I mean is like the I was going back to the sentiment that Clifford Simak said, that it will, because like his idea, and a lot of people thought that science fiction was starting to gain legitimacy and quality, but then something like this took it back to that they thought was lesser quality.
But the other thing is that
it did. Whether I'm not saying that's bad. All I'm saying is that it just changed it, and then that probably that I wouldn't doubt Star Wars made sort of the end or partial end to the new wave, because that really broke it, because it became popular then. Which I can thank it for that.
What I think is really interesting is you did have people that were legitimizing science fiction, but then because whoever it was that were labeling things didn't want to legitimize science fiction, they call it speculative fiction. You know, so you had like people like J.G. Ballard and P.D. James, all these authors writing science fiction, but it was, because it was more academic, they'd go, well, it's not science fiction then, is it? Do you know what I mean? So
I think a lot of that, the speculative fiction, because that's like Harlan Ellison was one of the proponents of it, Judith Merrill. But I think a lot of times is because there were literary authors, and I'll use that in quotation marks, that refused, because they would write something that is science fiction, like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. He said it wasn't science fiction.
Yeah.
Because it's literature. It's literature.
He didn't want to, because science fiction had a reputation of being like Star Wars, and he didn't want to have that reputation. And that's the point. It's just this weird thing where they're not helping by doing that because clearly you can have academic science fiction. I mean, people go, well, I don't want to call it that because it's academic. It was like, well, why don't you
Olaf Stapleton, I think it was him that said he didn't write science fiction at all. Olaf Stapleton said he didn't write science fiction.
Clearly he did.
Yeah. Well,
it's a case of snobbery, surely, isn't it? It's just like
it is because.
Yeah.
But the thing is, because
other people's snobbery as well.
Because, but the thing is that it's the sentiment that it's like Star Wars. It is important, and I say that. I just don't personally like it but I like the old stuff. I like the old space opera stuff, and I do like space opera, but but that's a personal thing. But
you like this, don't you, Sean? If you can see it without the glare.
I don't know what it is. What is it?
It's Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, which of course is one of the bases for, and it's quite weird because it's quite weird when you watch it because there are definitely C3PO is in it. It's weird thing. But it's interesting that you take it, you put it in space, change it around a bit, and then you get more mixed feelings about it. I mean, nobody disputes that this is, a great film, right? So
yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like with science fiction, because of the history of science fiction, there like people like Brian Aldiss and other writers and other academics feel that because Hugo Gernsback created a whole genre, like he formed it and it went into the pulps, genre pulps that ghettoized science fiction, and that hurt the development of science fiction. That's the view that they said, because the pulps were considered by the public not very good, and therefore that's why people like Olaf Stapleton, Aldous Huxley didn't like the term science fiction because they associated it with lesser quality of stuff. And then that was happening at the time. And then that's where John W. Campbell was trying to raise it to this. I'm not saying that I follow all this stuff, but this is how I think the process was. And it did ghettoize it.
I think the difference is that is absolutely true of then, and now it's a bit of a mix. Because there's been lots of people that would see science fiction as quite an intelligent, thought-provoking thing, as well as the people that think it's a load of nonsense. Do you know what I mean? Whereas in the old days, it would be seen as a pulpy thing only. And I think things have developed, and certainly in the last 20, 30 years, I think.
Maybe a little more than that. There's a lot of academia that's happening with science fiction it's been developing over the last 50 years. And some of it is just pure navel gazing, but others are very, very good.
Since I've been in education as a teacher and known, the curriculums more, and actually definitely since I've been an adult in that situation, I know that science fiction is studied in schools and colleges and universities. So, that wouldn't be the case if they're all Princess of Mars.
Well, I think I'm sure, and it might have just been what do you call it? Not a fad, but a gimmick. But I'm sure I remember years and years ago, the University of Reading offering Klingon language courses as a serious.
Yeah, I think UCLA was doing that as well. But you see, no, it has science fiction has gained legitimacy, and it is being taught in universities. See, that's the thing. I'm not what Brian Aldiss about the ghettoizing of it, of putting it into pulps, was that no slicks, as it was called, wanted to print than science fiction. Prior to that, science fiction was in higher quality magazines, the slicks, and then it all went into the other ones. And it wasn't until like Ray Bradbury occasionally and Robert A. Heinlein started picking away and started getting stuff in the Slicks magazines, the more higher level magazines, and it's because like Brian Aldiss's idea and others have felt that it's because there was that the genre magazine hurt the development of science fiction, because it was developing on a different way, and they think that it could have developed into something even more than it actually is.
If you compare science fiction, I think this is a really big point I'm about to make. So if you think about
Listen up, everyone.
if you compare that to fantasy and horror, right? Fantasy and horror don't tend to have the big themes that you get in science fiction, like dystopian books, post-apocalyptic books, philosophical books, the way that technology changes society, the way that we deal with kind of human nature, as far as how we deal with changes in technology and how that would affect our own relationships and what we need as people. Like, you know, even simple things like how a family would deal with a robot that does the work for them, and simple things like that. But those kind of things are actually quite deep, and those are the kind of reasons why that would have been temporary. Whereas now, I'd still say horror and fantasy is probably still seen as just escapism. Whereas I don't think science fiction is seen as just escapism by everybody. It might be by some, but there's a lot of people that would see it as a very thought-provoking genre.
Well, I do agree with you, because I think it's more relatable, science fiction. Even though some of it can seem on the surface a bit outlandish, there's generally an element of technological possibility with it. And when you talk about robots in the home, you know, when we've got AIs that we can ask the time and all sorts of things already, we're close. You know, we're on the crux of what is to come. So that's more relatable. I mean, there's no
we need a thing where we go, Alexa, can you play Status Quo? And they go, I don't think I can do that, David.
But like I agree with you. Like everything that I said doesn't disagree with what you're saying, that it has there is a depth to it, and there's been writers like Isaac Asimov and others that say science fiction is really the only fiction that really talks about things today, because what other fiction do you have at the time that, you know, at the most any technology will be in it will be a TV, a film, going to a film, maybe a car, but that's all older stuff. Science fiction deals with stuff that people are dealing with immediately, as you say, with the technology. And
but there are the different degrees, of course, right? And I guess this is where when you talk about everyday items having kind of advanced, that's relatable. Darth Vader, as much as I do also like Star Wars, it's less relatable, of course. It's almost like a science fiction. It's like a science fiction history or a science fiction mythology, rather than what we can see as a natural progression of our own lives. So
well, science fiction has lots of different hats, right? And it can be pulpy science fiction, and that is why Star Wars is a very basic, archetypal, good versus evil, fun, escapist story. I don't think if you're going to really take Star Wars really seriously, then I think you've misread it. Do you know what I mean? It's like the people that get really upset over a Marvel thing that they've changed something about a Marvel thing. It's like it's a Marvel superhero. Calm down. It's not that deep.
Well, actually, where do superheroes come in? Are they science fiction or are they in their own?
They did come out. They did come out of science fiction. Most of this stuff came out of the early period of the 20s. Like these things were around before, but they developed on their own with the super science, superhuman type thing. And that's what happened in the late 20s and early 30s. There was so much superhuman stuff. And that's where I was saying there was divergences there. There was a divergence to the comic book superhero type. And then again, there was the divergence with John Jumpy Campbell trying to get them, getting rid of that kind of stuff. And he was trying to shape it into something else. And that's where, like, I come back to the thing. I'm not really, I personally don't like Star Wars, but that's not what I'm saying here. What I'm saying is that Star Wars, to a lot of people, where they believe that science fiction was starting to ramp up and getting a more detailed, more literary and things like that. And then all of a sudden Star Wars comes along and takes it back 50 years to those basic things that were in the 20s and 30s. and it got a lot. It became very popular, so that seeped into the other science fiction of the time and since then. So that's all I'm saying. Like it's an evolution, but the Star Wars did change things, and did it change it for the better? That is a question I can't answer that myself. I personally think that it didn't do it for better, but that's just a personal opinion of that. The other things that I'm talking about here are actually sort of, I think, events that sort of happened during the evolution of science fiction.
I think you could argue that if Star Wars hadn't have happened, things would have gone on the same way. Because Star Wars is not all of science fiction, and there's been other things that have been very pulpy that have come out since then as well, and there's been really intelligent academic science fiction from the year Dot to now anyway. And I'm just not convinced with the argument that it ruined science fiction.
I never said it ruined. I never said it ruined.
You keep quoting Simak and saying
but he's saying that puts it back. It delays it, not.
Yeah, we lost
Not sure
Mark.
yeah. I'm not saying it. All it did was like, and I'm not like, there are people that have said this. It did hurt science fiction in the way that they were viewing it at the time.
Yeah. I'm not convinced it did. That's all I'm saying. I'm sure that everyone's got a right to say they did.
But see, that's the thing. You're mixing up what I'm saying here, because it's like you're saying that it's not. But what I'm saying is that they are, in their view of science fiction, and these writers were the writers of the time. They're the ones that said that it did this, that it put, and it did put it back. It did because science fiction was starting. But the other thing is too that during the late 70s, science fiction was starting to lag a little bit as well. So Star Wars actually put a shock into things.
Sean, they probably felt threatened by it. Doesn't mean they're right. They just felt threatened by it.
I don't think they felt threatened. They probably didn't like the fact that it made so much money.
They probably felt pressure to write in a more basic archetypal way, and they thought, well, I want to write more intelligent stories. No one's going to want to read them. That's probably what they felt. So
I've never come across that in the writing. It's just that they felt that and the reason why I used the Clifford Simak quote is because that is felt throughout a lot of the science fiction world of the time.
Oh, absolutely.
And the reason for that is, as I say, is because they didn't feel threatened that it would do this. They just didn't like the fact, I think, that something that they thought was gone 50 years ago and was sort of forgotten about, all of a sudden becomes popular again. And then because popular things push out other things that are less popular.
That's what it's down to. It's like, when you get the age-old argument about people who want to make independent, thought-provoking, more cerebral films, and they're competing with the huge blockbusters. They're thinking that blockbusters are ruining the cinematic experience and ruining filmmakers' chance to make good films because no one wants to see them. Do you know what I mean? That's the same kind of argument, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it is. It is ruining it. It is ruining that vision of things. It's a simple fact. You can't say it's not. It's ruining that vision. And then you can argue that vision is maybe wrong, but it is ruining that vision.
But it's the general public. Do you know what I mean? General public don't want to think that much.
No, they don't. They don't.
No, so
that's
the point is. So that's what I'm saying is that is it the films that like Star Wars that all these blockbusters that stop independent films from being popular, or if these independent films came out, would the public go out and see them? Because remember, Ridley Scott complained recently about his film that was a flop, and he blamed it on Marvel. But it's like, well, maybe if the Marvel films went out, people still wouldn't have gone to see it.
Well, see, there's another argument to that, and the argument is that because people don't get to see this other stuff, you don't know how this will impact people, and so
true.
there's that argument.
The cinemas don't give them much of a chance. That's true.
Exactly, and because the popularity, like all of a sudden, it just sort of, it seems that, you know, I have nothing against popularity, but it can smother everything else.
Yeah,
and
it is
that
a bit of a cycle.
problem.
It's a bit of a cycle because obviously the cinemas don't put them in there for long because they don't think people want to see them. But if people did see them if they were there for longer, you might get more people seeing them.
Exactly. That's the other side of the argument, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think there's a world for both this stuff. I think there's a world for Star Wars, and
that's why it's so good to try and support independent cinema, and why it's so good to try and support independent publishers that do smaller. Although saying that, I mean the big publishers bring out cerebral books, so we can overstate it now. I mean, in the old days, I think it was more of it. They did feel more threatened by it, but now I think there is so much intelligent science fiction coming out, and I'd say more books. I see more and more books with really a lot of depth to them that people are raving about, and they're not going, "Oh, this is great because it's like Star Wars." They're going, "This is great."
Let's look at the comments here, though, Gareth. Like Scott was saying, it's a shame that Star Wars wasn't marketed as fantasy instead of science fiction. Would it have made a difference? I think it could have made a difference.
If it was marketed as fantasy but it's set in space, people still would have called it science fiction.
Yeah, but it's a little bit of both. It is science fiction, because there is fantasy elements to it. It's a blend. It's a blend of those two things. But
someone said
labeling things do make a difference at times. And then other times it doesn't.
I don't know which author it was, but someone said that all science fiction is fantasy, which is true.
Yeah, I heard of that, but yeah, well, that's the thing. Fantasy in the big picture, but because fantasy has become, like I say, science fiction has a framework. Fantasy has become, you don't use fantasy in that sense anymore. It's like romance. Romance used to be something about adventure, but now when you say romance, nobody thinks of adventure. They think of love stories. So that definition of fantasy no longer applies a lot of times, but it does make sense, but it no longer applies in that way because nobody's going to use it. It's like the term sci-fi.
That's just definitions changing. That's not a
That's what I'm going to say. It's like sci-fi started by Forrest J. Ackerman sometime in the 40s, I think, as abbreviation for science fiction, because hi-fi was becoming popular, and that's what he took it from. And then when academics and scholars started looking at science fiction, they noticed the difference of the like the John W. Campbell stuff, the more cerebral stuff that you're talking about, and the super science stuff, the space opera stuff. So a lot of them decided and started writing that sci-fi is that stuff and SF and science fiction is this. So because there is a divergence, there was a divergence.
Again, that's someone feeling like they have to divorce themselves from more pulpy science fiction. Sci and fi are short versions of science and fiction. So it doesn't really matter, does it? Do you know what I mean? But they felt threatened by it, or they didn't like being in the same category. So they thought,
this thing, I don't think they were threatened by it. They noticed the difference. So therefore, it's like a lot of people. They like to categorize things. There is a difference between those two types of science fiction, correct or not? There's two different types.
Well, to be honest, I think it's dangerous to say that because there are some there are lots of books that have elements of both.
Yes, so, there are.
I think you're actually just creating division in science fiction that doesn't need to be there.
No, it's not a division. It's just saying that this is one style. It's like saying then why do we have post-apocalyptic? Why do we have everything else? It's the same divisions, and they
because you're trying to redefine an umbrella term. So I think that's going way deep into redefining things that don't need redefining.
No, this wasn't redefining an umbrella term. This was looking at two different streams of science fiction. Two different streams of science.
That's what I'm saying. It's not necessarily two different streams because you can get both elements in the same product.
You can, yes, you can, but they're not talking about those. They're talking about the ones that don't have
what happens to them?
The other stream. What
happens to the ones that got both?
That is called science fiction. That is called because there is those elements to it. You might need to learn what the term. I'm not saying that this is. I
feel I should be in the middle and kind of like keep.
I just think it's funny. I just think it's funny.
The thing is, you're missing
science. Fiction.
No, what the idea is that there is a difference with it. That if there is Superman and superhumans or space opera without much of a story, and it's just that archetypal stuff without any like philosophy or any more depth to it other than the superficial story, that's the stuff that was termed sci-fi. And and the other stuff was basically termed SF, the science fiction. And then we moved to other things of speculative fiction, but that comes later. But the thing is, my whole point was I'm trying to say is that you're saying definitions change. And what I'm saying is that's what's happened because fans, and especially during the 70s and everything else, they've heard the term sci-fi, but they didn't know what that actually meant at the time that it was being done. So therefore, it became an umbrella term for everything.
Yeah.
It became an umbrella term for everything.
That's
all I'm saying. I'm just saying that that's what it was. I'm not advocating one or the other.
I know, and I'm absolutely getting what you're saying. I'm just saying that to pretty much probably everybody, it just means science fiction. If someone asked me what my favorite sci-fi film was, if someone said that, I wouldn't go, "Oh, do you mean what kind of science fiction do you mean?" I just answer, something. I could even answer Arrival, which is a very cerebral film.
So you'll never use post-apocalyptic, time travel, science fiction, First Contact. You'll never use those terms.
Yeah, of course I would, but that doesn't mean that's not the same.
That's the same. That's just another term. The sci-fi is another term.
There's subgenres within science fiction.
But that's what this is. This is.
Shortening. It's an abbreviation for science fiction.
It is, but the definition of what it was.
I just wrote it down earlier. And it looked like short versions of the same words.
The sci-fi, that's what Forrest Ackerman did. But what I'm talking about is
Sean, I know what you're saying. Sean, I know what you're saying.
You don't seem to be because you keep coming back to it. It's sci-fi is the same as saying time travel, science fiction.
It's not. I know what you're saying.
It is. That's the you don't see it that way, but that was the idea that was meant to be.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I'm saying. It was the idea that it was meant to be, but it got changed, and that's what I'm talking about.
And we're living in 2022 now.
How it's changed, and this whole conversation I hoped was to be about of how science fiction has changed through time, and the definitions have changed. And I'm not sure how we got here because the whole point is to say that there are things like Star Wars that, and I've pointed out what people say, and you may not agree with what their beliefs are. I'm not saying that I believe them. I'm saying
Sean, if you asked a man on the street, he wouldn't go sci-fi, or surely you don't mean Solaris, because that's not sci-fi.
That's my whole point. That's my whole point of how things change. That's my whole point.
Yeah.
That is my whole point. But you see, the thing is, but you saying that sci-fi is not that is no longer that. It's no longer that separation. It's no longer that,
Yeah.
but that's what it was meant to be.
If you went in a
It was
shop
meant
and
to
had a
be.
science fiction section, it might just have sci-fi on the top.
It
It's not gonna
it
just-
will.
it's-
It will.
Yeah, it won't just be pulpy science fiction, will it?
No, it.
Because things have changed.
That's what I'm saying. That's
Well,
exactly.
there you go. Cool.
But you're saying that it never was that way. I'm saying
No,
it
I haven't said that.
that way.
I haven't said
It
that.
was
I'm
that
saying-
way for a
I'm
while.
saying the reason why it's changed is because it's just an abbreviation of the words, and that's how people use it.
That's not quite exactly how it had changed. There is it's
It might have been
changed
different
because
those days,
people
but how people
because
use it.
they're. If you just let me speak for a little bit, and then I will explain for the
You've
very
already
last
explained
time.
it.
Wait.
Go on, you've already
Both
explained
of you, just stop for a second, right? Just stop, because we're
You've already
taking
explained
it far too seriously. The way I see it, and maybe I missed the very beginning of the argument as I got cut off.
I didn't
The
realize
way I
that.
see it is when I use as someone who is really doesn't know anything about it, right? The way I use sci-fi, see sci-fi is purely as an abbreviation of science fiction. I see it only.
Yeah.
Maybe it's used
That's what
wrongly,
people do. That's
but
what people do.
it's an umbrella term that encompasses all the things you're talking about in my mind. I've
Yeah,
only learned.
I'm talking, and I'm talking. I agree with that. That's what has happened now.
Well, there we go.
What I'm talking about, if you just wait a minute, what I'm talking about is where the term came from and how it was defined for a while, and then it changed. That's all I'm saying.
Well,
But you're
let's move
saying
on.
it never was that way.
No, I didn't say that. I said that it's not relevant anymore.
I think it's still relevant, because if you talk about the evolution of science fiction, it's relevant.
Well,
It's relevant.
But not. I'm talking about the way people just talk about it now.
Yeah,
Obviously, if you look at
and I
the
agree with
evolution,
that. So
well, there
I
you go.
agree with that
It's
fully. I
So
agree with
anyway,
100%.
What have people said in the comments?
guys,
Look at
I like this idea about products, not art, because it got me thinking about He-Man. He-Man is fantasy or science fiction?
fancy.
And
isn't it?
because, well, no, I don't think it is, because
They're
they
aliens, are they? Are they aliens?
they're on another planet,
Yeah.
and they do drive kind of occasionally. They do drive these like spacey vehicles,
Yeah, they do.
and of course,
Yeah.
it was a cartoon that basically was one long advertisement to buy the toys. So the toys came before the show. I mean, I loved the show as a kid, but
But Star Wars started that because it obviously created a huge toy industry.
yeah, but
And
the toys for Star Wars came. The toys for Star Wars came after the films.
Yeah. But
Whereas
I'm saying about the
literally Mattel made the toys and then made the series to sell the toys. So it was.
See, this is the thing with definitions of science fiction. It's been right from the beginning, and I'm talking about historically wise. That you get 5 people that are science fiction fans in a room and ask them what science fiction is, you'll get 10 definitions.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's where you're saying, when Mark says, "Is it science fiction?" and you said it was science fiction.
No, he said fantasy.
No,
Or
yeah,
fantasy.
and then Mark said, well, he said a couple of other points. I said, yeah, you're right, it's science fiction. Yeah, I agreed with him.
Yeah, see, but the whole point of everything that I've been saying here is talking about evolution, and that's the one thing that we seem to be crossing here and butting heads. Is you're talking about everything now, and I'm talking about how we got to now.
Okay. I started off talking about what TV shows I watched.
Yeah, but no, this argument, where it's developed into, was because it changed from that, and I was saying how we got to here, because about the Star Wars, with the Star Wars, where it was, and who was it say here? It's a game changer. Like Bart says, it's a game changer. He's exactly right. It is a game changer, but in what way and how was it used as a game changer? Which I think is interesting to look at.
There's 2 ways, the 2 obvious ways it was game changer. One in the way that films were made afterwards, and there was loads of Star Wars copies after that, and because of that marketing thing, toys that Mark was talking about, that things started to be made to sell toys.
Yeah,
And there
but
wasn't, there
the
hadn't
thing
been a
is,
thing before that.
and then what effect did that have on science fiction that was just before that?
Well, if
That's
you
what
ask,
I'm talking
I don't know
about.
if you know this, Sean, but if you ask Clifford Simak, he says that it probably sent science fiction back a number of years. That's what Clifford Simak said.
That's he just saying that people won't know. See, what I'm talking about is people's perception of science fiction before, of the science fiction community before Star Wars came in, and that's the perception. And I'm saying I never said I agree with any of this stuff that I'm saying. I'm talking about this with other people.
Said about it, I wasn't sure if that was true. That's
every generation, whatever the genre, whether it's sci-fi, science fiction, space opera, horror, whatever, has its own thing that introduces them to that. Exactly. So whatever happens for a lot of people, whatever the definition of Star Wars is, it falls under that umbrella category for most people, and it will be for a large number of people their gateway drug into the genre of science fiction.
It was for me,
which is only a positive.
So, yeah.
Well, is it a positive? Like, that's the thing. That's another argument, whether it's a positive. And I'm not getting into that argument whether it's good or bad. All I'm saying is it did do this, and this was the view before, and this was this. And you keep Gareth, like, you fixating on the fact that we're in 2022 and this is the way it is. And I agree with all that. But what I'm trying to say is something else about the evolution of things.
Yeah, no, Sean, you keep suggesting that I'm like taking away some of the things you're saying, but I'm not. I'll keep nodding my head every time you say stuff. I'll nod my head.
But why do you keep saying that it's not a term at all? And I'm trying. And every time I say this was the term that was. Wait till I ask the question, please. The term, like I asked, when I say this was the definition that was given by the academics or whoever at the time, and you're saying that it's not relevant. It's no longer relevant, but it was then. And then how did we get to today? But you keep saying that it's wrong. That it's wrong. That view at the time is not wrong. That was their view. It's like now everybody thinks that Star Wars is great. In 20 or 50 years, there could be something else, and everybody thinks that Star Wars is crap. Things change, and that's the thing. Now, how did we get from point A to point B to point C? That's what I've been trying to talk about.
The way that we got from point A to point B was that people started using that term to define everything, rather than just the pulpy science fiction that the other authors were saying they wanted to do. That's all it is. The term sci-fi got used more often. That's all it was. It's not particularly weird.
It's a little more than that, but yes, I agree that
we've got some support in the comments, Sean. The newest one from the Spaminator. He's declaring the way he's standing with you there, Sean. I
didn't even realize I was disagreeing. I mean, I'm just
honestly, it's a little bit above my head, this, because I just don't really see the problem. I see what both of you are saying. One of you is saying, like, the term doesn't really mean what you think it means. It's evolved. But the issue is that term is used for better or worse as an umbrella.
That's the key. That's the key there, Mark, is for better or for worse. And then you can go on to something else to say, then you can go on to argue whether it has been better or worse. Has it been better for the genre or for worse for the genre? That's a different argument, though.
This argument really probably only concerns a very small number of people. To be honest, I mean, I know you've got.
If I think about the 40 years I've been talking about science fiction, nobody's ever been upset about the idea of the word sci-fi, and said and somehow made that only talk about a small brand of science fiction. I've never had a huge kind of upset with that. It's just the weirdest thing to me.
I don't even know why this is an upset, because that's the thing I don't understand, because all I'm saying is this was the term as we agreed on. I hope we agreed that definitions change now. But the thing is, if somebody uses a term that other people see as a different definition, and we're in a changeover period, that's going to cause conflict because people are not going to understand. They're not going to understand what the definition is. And
but I guess the point is that
too, that
if you're trying, if you'll have to be more specific. If you're talking to someone that doesn't know the history of the word sci-fi, then you have to be more specific, wouldn't you? Because most people wouldn't know that.
That's what I was trying to do was give the
But I already
history.
knew, so you didn't have to tell me. I already knew.
Yeah, but it didn't seem to be, because you kept saying that it wasn't relevant then, and it's still not relevant now.
No, because things have changed. Like you keep saying, things have changed. That's the only thing I was saying. When someone said I stand with Shawn, I'm not standing against you, mate.
Yeah, but but see, everything that I hear from you is that sorry, I give up. Then I give up.
No, I don't understand.
I think Gareth's mom is really worried that there's an argument brewing. So
No, I mean I don't understand.
Look. Let's just leave it, because I can imagine it is awkward for some people watching it now at the moment because there's obviously a misunderstanding or whatever. But the main focus of this really was what to find out.
I thought it was why we like science fiction.
Science fiction or science? Sorry. No, but yeah, why? Well, Gareth, why do you like it? I mean, you started off by saying that the film that can't be mentioned now was, important for you. But
what? Almost every TV show I've watched over the years, every book I've read, almost. I mean, this is a bit of an English, but tons and tons, a huge percentage of the books I've read. I just love science fiction. It's got everything in it I want. I think I watched what was it? I think Michael K. Vaughan just recently did a video where he said if I had to read one more genre for the rest of my life and nothing else, it would be science fiction, and that would definitely be true for me. I just think everything's in it. I think it's deeply philosophical.
What was
deeply fascinating?
Do you remember your first contact with science fiction books? I mean,
yeah, I do. Yeah, again. Probably in the old definition, it would have been sci-fi rather than science fiction. But I absolutely, when I was a teenager, I absolutely loved the Stainless Steel Rat books by Harry Harrison. I thought they were brilliant. They were this kind of comic. It's not particularly deep. It's not particularly sort of beautifully written. But I was 15 and I thought 14 probably. I was quite young, and I just like this sort of cocky criminal that was. Meeting up with these aliens and sort of basically kind of tricking them and getting sort of his, getting a better life out of it from doing that. I don't know if anyone else knows the Stainless Steel Rat books, but that was a big entry thing for me. But I've read all sorts of different science fiction over the years, and someone mentioned when we talked about in that big chat we had yesterday when someone mentioned we were talking about literate science fiction. Someone mentioned Hyperion. Love Hyperion. This is a fantastic book. And you can get that kind of reference to literature in science fiction as well as you can get just the fun stuff. I just think everything's in it. I think it's really interesting looking at the future. I love the concept of life on other planets, and the idea of first contact. How would we deal with that? The idea of looking at sort of allegorical stuff about like a dystopian society, or how we deal with an apocalypse, or how we deal with a sort of game-changing shift in our society, like being absolutely reliant on androids or AI in some form. Those kind of all of these different things. I just think it's incredible, and there's so many fantastic writers that really kind of think deeply about what does it really mean. What do these themes? Where would these themes take us? And when someone really plays on it really well, I just think it's amazing. So I think science fiction has got everything in it.
I just see Scott said he's lost signal, but he's back now. And I'm just thinking he didn't miss anything. Shawn, what about you? Did your first contact, as it were, with science fiction come about through books or through magazines or those short stories? What
I can't remember exactly, but I remember, as I said earlier, that it's Edgar Rice Burroughs. I remember reading Edgar Rice Burroughs stories early on, or very early on. And then I think it went to magazines, and somewhere started buying books. And I actually read a lot of the Star Trek novelizations and stories, like Alan Dean Foster, James Blish, that stuff. I read a lot of that in the late 70s. But I didn't continue with it because I felt that I moved on and I found more things that spoke to me in deeper wise, and things like Dune. I found Dune, and that just blew me away. Sometime in the like 1980 or something like that, or maybe 82 or something, like before 85 anyway, I discovered Dune, and that just blew me away. And at that
how did you know what to read though? I mean, because now obviously we could just ask each other through the ones of the internet, we can watch videos. I mean, would you find out by reading the magazines and say this looks good, or did you have friends around you as well who would say, hey Shawn, check this out? Or because it's a minefield for me if I didn't have any of you. Well, actually there's positives and negatives. Like, you all come at me at once saying read this, read this. But then when I look online as well, it's like there's so much. It's I mean, you helped me, Shawn, by giving me some really good starting points for the future, not necessarily for next month, I suppose, because it would be quite a way getting in there. But how did you know, Shawn? How did you know that you were going to like is it because you watched Star Trek and thought, I'm going to try the books, or were there other things? How did you come to do?
Yeah, well, that's what happened. Like, I watched Star Trek, and then I saw the books, so those were the first thing you say. I didn't have anybody in any kind of literature or to tell me fiction what to read. What I did was science fiction was a bit easier because I did have some magazines, and then I read a lot, because you can read a lot of authors in the short stories, and then there'll be ones that you like. And then I went to the bookstores, the used bookshops, and I searched out books by them, or just picks. And I did this with everything, not just science fiction. I'd pick something off the shelf, and I'd look to see what it was, what it was about, and did that sound interesting to me, and that's how I read it. And then later I got to a place where there were bins, where it was 10 cents per book for stuff. So I was buying anything and everything science fiction, and I read around, and there was a lot of authors that I really enjoyed, and then I pursued and read everything by them. And at some point, like I picked up Dune, and that's how. And I thought, this sounds interesting. It's nice and big too, and I like that idea, because most of the stuff I'd be reading up to that point was short. It's like, less than 300 pages, probably less than 100 pages, a lot of the stuff. And I also, at some point, I don't know how I encountered Clifford Simak, who I like a lot, and I pursued to read everything, or trying to read everything of him. But it probably was in a magazine, and that's how I think I found Asimov, and I like this. And then I go to the bookshop and I see Foundation. What's that? And then I just sort of leapfrog from that. But
I think a lot of us, before we have that sort of advice from people, we read the back of the books, don't we? And
well, that's all you'd have. That's all I had, was the back of the books. And occasionally, once I discovered, even though I read magazines, it took me a long time to discover the book reviews in there.
So, I mean, would you say, though, sorry to interrupt, though, but would you say that you had to wade through a load of crap to find gold? Or generally,
yeah. Well, not so much crap. I still enjoyed it. That's the thing. I still enjoy it. Like, I can watch, like, anytime there's a science fiction show on, I'm interested in it, and I can watch stuff. Even though I think it's sort of crap, I still get something out of it. And I will read books that, like A. Van Vogt, I love his imagination and stuff like that. He's a crappy writer, I think. He's not a great writer, but I just love his books. And then I can enjoy that kind of stuff. So I can still enjoy the slush, and I really think that I agree with Theodore Sturgeon that 95% of science fiction is crap, and 95% of everything is crap. But your crap is different from my crap. 95%.
Well, because I think because science fiction is a setting, isn't it? It's like something Mark said earlier, that if you had the same plot of something, but it was set in space and it was robots or aliens instead of whatever the domestic situation is, then we like it more because it's in space and there's robots.
I mean, has anyone done that, for example, with Shakespeare? I mean, you've seen a lot of Shakespearean adaptations, but has anyone literally just taken Hamlet and put it on a spaceship or on a different planet with aliens?
There's been stuff. Forbidden Planet is based on
Is that The Tempest? Is it? Or...
Tempest. Yes, yeah, I couldn't think of it. Yeah, and there's a lot of Shakespeare stuff in it. There is a lot of Shakespeare, and this is the thing. And going back to the archetypes, people did put a lot of stuff into their stories, and people miss that because they never looked at it, because it was just trash. It was science fiction, so therefore trash. And we mentioned Hyperion. Hyperion, I think, is one for me, one of the best. It's just melded together of everything. On the surface, it's basically the old sci-fi space opera stuff on the surface. But you start peeling away that surface, you start finding multi-layers. The whole structure is on Canterbury Tales. Like, you just start peeling away the things with that. But not all science fiction has that. A lot of it just has the veneer. I would say most of it has the veneer. And it's really nice because now I think, Gareth, I think it's because there's more science fiction being written in the past 30 years or 50 years, say, than there was all the time before that. So there's going to be more of the meaty stuff there. But I actually think that it's getting less now, like currently. And I think gems are few and far between.
It might also be that because it used to be when science fiction was at its early stage, it was based around short stories, wasn't it? And it might be that if you've got a longer product, you could potentially put more depth into it, and it could be that'll be part of it as well. But certainly, I think also that I think there's been people that have tried to make, like authors that have tried to make a deliberate effort to make science fiction more academic and cerebral.
Samuel R. Delany is a perfect example of that, and many others.
And well, the new wave was all about that, wasn't it? The new wave was all about taking the old influences and doing something more modern with them.
Anyway, just quickly, I want to say Scott's put a comment in there, and we should probably look at it because he should really be with us. And his first book was Ender's Game. I haven't read it. I'm sure you guys have probably.
Yeah, it's a really good book. You see, this is the thing. Yeah, like Gareth, you're saying about the short stories. Even within the short stories, you do get the gems for the old stuff. But yeah, it wasn't until the late 40s that that they started making fiction books. The first, some of the first ones was anthologies, but short stories, and then they started coming out with cheap paperbacks of novels, and that's where a lot of writers then moved from the digests or the science fiction magazines, started writing novels, and some of them were successful. But if you look at some of them, they didn't really know how to write novels yet, because they were just writing longer short stories. They're still good. And that's where I think he's gone again. That's where I think Heinlein. I think Heinlein is so much better in his short stories, but he didn't quite have the skill to do novels, and it took him a long time to do that. And maybe some of his later stuff, I have to revisit him, but that's another thing. But yeah, it's like, and then they're more publishing.
I get the impression that even the biggest Heinlein devotees say that he's patchy. So
yeah, and it's because of that, I think, and I think a lot of the writers were, because and then there was specialist publishers like Gnome Press, Fantasy Press, and Shasta Press, and all these other ones in the 50s. I'm just talking about in America now. And then all of a sudden, somewhere in the late 50s or so, like mainstream publishers started publishing. A little bit earlier, but mainstream publishers started publishing science fiction because they saw money in it. and then you've got you know, hard and true editors that probably forced the writers to write better, I think, than they did previously, because the ones that usually had the smaller press ones were usually science fiction fans, and they may not, they liked what they liked. And then, you know, I think it developed more. And then now it is in every mainstream. Like, I don't think there's any mainstream publisher that doesn't have science fiction. Can you think of anything? Everybody does science fiction.
Yeah. No, that's what we were saying earlier. That one of the first things I said was it's mainstream now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
It's not some weird corner of literature.
Yeah, and the thing is, and there's so much of it being done. And so that means that, you know, there's going to be much more crap, I guess you could say. But as I say, your crap and everybody's crap is different from everybody else's. But then, because of that, just by percentage wise, there's going to be a lot more higher percentage of better novels. Yeah. However, I think that recently, I think because of other changes outside of things, and I think that's happening all through fiction. And you could talk about this or argue about the reasons for this for, I don't know how, you know, for hours or days, of the reasons why I think publishing and the stuff that's being done. People talk about the MFA program, and as soon as it's like, you know, like Steve Donahue talks about that, you know, they bring their lawyers to their MFA program, and they're saying that, you know, you have to tell me this is good. And you can't, as an editor, you can't change this because I know better. And I think that, like, I think that's one of a huge thing where fiction in general, and probably academic stuff, I mean, everything, all kind of publishing is happening. And so I think there's been peaks, like, I think that like the early part, like the what I call the golden age, like John W. Campbell, and that was really great science fiction for the time. And then it sort of slumped a little bit in the 50s. And then the new wave came out. I don't particularly like the new wave, but it made an indelible impression on science fiction. It did a lot of crap, I think, but the good stuff carried on into things. And because it is more book related, I think you're right that you got more time in a novel to delve into other ideas. I think everybody does it.
I absolutely love short stories, so I'm not. Yeah, I'm not slagging off short stories, but just you know, just basic common sense that you can put more in a novel if there's more words. So you know, the potential's there. So there's been some incredibly deep stuff happening in some of the recent stuff that's been coming out. You know, so yeah. I mean, it's the genre that's alive and kicking, basically, isn't it?
Yeah, I have to look at some of the new stuff, and I will be eventually getting. I'm just in a period of rereading, but I do want to test new authors. What was I going to say? Like you talk about the short story. Like, have you read the two sort of short story basis for Hyperion? I think one's called Centaur, and then the something Memory of Siri. They're two sort of proto Hyperion stories, but without all the depth to it,
right?
You know, and so he's taken the framework of that and some of the story and reworked it into something else. But you could never like how can you get this depth of Hyperion in a short story?
Yeah, no, exactly. That Hyperion is a very specific kind of book, isn't it? It's kind of unique, I think, in a lot of ways. And again, you couldn't really do that in anything else but science fiction. What he does with it, so it's like you were saying earlier, it's a really good example of multi-layered science fiction.
And then you get somebody like Samuel R. Delany. I think. Have you read Dahlgren?
I've read Babel 17 and Nova, I think it is, and another one. And I've struggled with him a little bit. I think he's
Well, see, he's experimental, but for Dahlgren, I think, like, I had to read it a second time. It was a 30-year gap between them, I think. And I recently read it earlier this year. And I struggled with the thought of, is this good or is this bad?
It's just like the way he writes. I mean, I haven't given up on him. I'm going to keep reading him, and I will reread Babel 17 as well. But the way he writes seems a bit random. Like it feels like he's not finished a sentence when he has. So it's
the experimental thing that he does.
Sometimes I just think, you should have written this better, mate.
But yeah,
he's clearly a genius.
Yeah, well, yeah, but what I'm getting at is that that's a multi-layered thing too, because you don't know what's happening here. You've got almost timelines that are overlapping, and character could be at different points at the same time, but in a different timeline to himself. It could be, and these are the things that are interesting.
Yeah. When I read Ubik, that was a really interesting experience. Like, I kept with Ubik, I really liked it. But the first 50 pages, I had to keep going because it's mental. And when I get to the end, it all made more sense, and it was quite thrilling. But it was also, it really made your brain hurt sometimes, because you're like, what are you on about? But again, like you said, it's part of the mood of the time that these new wave writers were thinking, I'm gonna mess with your brain a bit, and that was part of the fun of it. So and Ubik is quite an experience to read, I think.
Oh yeah, it's see, Phil K. Dick though is, again, that's in one of those writers that I need to revisit. Again, I think he was a better short story writer than a novel writer.
Yes, phenomenal ideas.
Yeah, and like, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep is very interesting, but it's one of these few cases that I think the film is a bit better than the book.
It focuses on certain things, doesn't it? Which you could say is more concise, but and he can go off on a tangent a little bit.
Yeah, and that's what Samuel R. Delany is, and you're talking about messing with your head. It's like he'll have on one page a diary that's being kept, like somebody found a notebook and there's a diary sort of that's in there, and then the person that's found it has started to write poetry, so he'll have bits of this interspersed in the text, and you go, okay, then you start to another section, but this person the second person that comes along will use the blank spaces to continue his stuff. So it's done page by page. So you read one section here, you go, wait a minute, now we're on to something else. Oh, that's after the part that was the beginning, or no, that's the beginning of that.
Yeah, this isn't science fiction, but that's what I hear about House of Leaves, and I guess it's all about whether or not it keeps you there enough, isn't it? Well, there's something that's happening in Dahlgren that I guess it's enough, and that's where I think that we'll get to these ones in a bit. I like that comment. It'd be good to talk about that comment from Scott in a second. I just tried to finish my thought, and I lost it for a second. What was I saying? Dahlgren. You were talking about Dahlgren.
Yeah, and the only thing that I wanted to say is the beginning, like when you finish it, the last sentence is the first part of the first sentence. So it's a circular. Oh no, I was saying, like, what science fiction is. This, like, Dahlgren does, to me, fit into the speculative fiction way, because there is elements of everything. There's elements of everything, and there's it's definitely not hard science fiction, but there's something weird going on. Is it fantasy? But it's not supernatural, it's not gods. There are things that have to be worked by the laws of physics, so therefore, and they may not be following what is happening here now, but they're still following the laws of physics, so I guess it is science fiction.
I think that was another thing that the new wave writers were doing. It was literally blending the genres as well, wasn't it? Like, they'd sort of, there was also almost a suggestion that the golden age was too specific about being space opera or whatever. You know, I like. So, can we just talk about Scott's comment there about the fact that there's so much modern fantasy, these huge series of books, or if they're not, they're still a huge book. And I do think there's something really special about these 250-page books that have these amazing ideas and can do it in 250 pages. I mean, the two big books by Alfred Bester, Stars My Destination and the Demolished Man, I think they're such fantastic books. And I recommend, if anyone's watching this and is just about to get into science fiction, I definitely recommend those two books. But they're quite short. And there's loads going on. I mean, every chapter, there's so much has happened in one chapter. And they've got so many different things that they've kind of chucking into the book. And he managed to do that without sort of doing, like, weighing down the book in world building. And I'm not suggesting that a couple of 100 pages of world building is a bad thing necessarily, because there's a skill in that. And if you can do that successfully and grab the reader and create this new world and stuff, that's awesome. But you can tell a really good story with a short book. So I do think I think that's a good point. That it's nice to have both. And if does become a trend where every book that comes out is huge, it does alienate the audience. That
well, the one thing I think, I don't know when it started, but there are longer science fiction series, you know, rather than just a trilogy or 3 or 4 books. They're going on now to, like, I've seen some that have like 15 books in this series, and you kind of wonder, and is it the fantasy rubbing off on this, or just publishers saying, oh, this sold well, we want more of it, we just want
that's a good point. I think that thing about publishers, I do think there's a pressure to nowadays say, if something's doing well, to do more of it. And just they would sign up for if the first book's successful, they go, can you write more of that? You know, and the authors might have that pressure as well. They might think, I'm onto a good thing here, so I'll expand the universe and write different stories about the same characters, and I'm still pretty much being quite creative, but I'm persuading the people that like the first book to buy the second one.
Well, that's the thing. Steve Donnie, I think it was him that said in our discussion group, with regards to it's the sameness, it's the same. It's like a lot of science fiction. Like there's a formula for science fiction. Like there's always
it depends how good a writer you are, isn't it?
Sorry,
it depends how good a writer you are.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. But there's things that people go to genre fiction for, and it's sometimes the you know, comfort thing, and the ideas for science fiction, I think, is the biggest thing. So a lot of times, a lot of stuff, even some of the big popular books that sold well, don't really have a great plot or great you know, characters or anything like that, but they're popular for whatever reason, but usually it's because of the ideas. And then if that does that, then they want the author to write the same thing over. But just
one of the really successful ones recently was the Expanse series, wasn't it? And if you think about the Expanse series, I've only read the first book, I thought it was absolutely amazing. I've got the next 3, so I've got 4 of them to read. You know, I would have read 4 of them once I get through those 3. But what I do hear is that they're all these separate entities, that there's loads of great ideas in all of them, and it's not that repetitive. That's what I hear.
Well, I should maybe read them, because I kind of liked I liked the first season of The Expanse, like the show. I watched it. I haven't read it, and I liked it because there were so many ideas or potential ideas that were happening here, but they never explored those later. They were just almost cut off. They never explored those ideas, and I felt cheated.
That's probably why. I mean, if you put these things in and he picks something to look at later in another book, that would be how he developed that, wouldn't it? So I say it's they, isn't it? There's 2.
Yeah. But that's what I mean. Like, hopefully the book does this, and if they don't do that, then I would feel cheated after reading it as well. And that's the one thing that I felt cheated about the series.
Well, I don't know for sure because I haven't watched the series. I wanted to read the books before I saw the series, but I think the series ends on the end of the first book, doesn't it? I think.
No, I thought it goes all the way through.
Does it go? Okay, but the the end of the first book,
I'm not sure.
kind of, I don't want to spoil anything, but it does make a huge change that I know makes the whole series change. Try not to spoil anything. And that would change the tone of the books as well because of this change that happens.
Yeah, but
So
but there's I think there's the sort of the history behind it and the reasons for these aliens doing these things that they set up, but they never explored. It was just truncated.
yeah, well, the first book doesn't even go in too much detail about that either. So
No, but in the series there was these tantalizing glimpses that I was really hoping that they would explore, and they never explored. So that's what I'm saying. I wonder, and I kind of think that because it's for television, they people don't want the depth into things, so they just wanted the superficial story of things. So maybe that's what they did and left all that stuff out. It's like I have not seen the new Dune film, but that's what it looks like they've done with the new Dune film. They've scraped off the surface layer and left everything else, the intrigue and everything else. And if they did Hyperion, what are they going to do? They're just going to scrape off the surface story and leave everything else.
if they did it as one film, then yeah, I mean it's difficult, isn't it, in 3 hours to do Dune. But that's what 2 films.
I just Sir Book says Dahlgren is one of my all-time favorite science fiction novels, but it's certainly a story you need to dedicate some serious time to read and absorb. Yeah, it is, and it, to me, this is a shining example of, I think, of the new wave, of what new wave could do, and
what science fiction can do as well. Because that was one thing I've always felt about science fiction, that it can be that complex.
Yeah. It definitely was. I think. He hated the. I don't know that one. Who wrote that?
There's a few people that you've reviewed on the channel recently, like Criminality did a big thing about it, and MJ's done it. Lots of people were reading it a couple of years ago and putting stuff on BookTube about it, but those 2 did it recently, and it's very, very complicated, that book.
If it's new, that's what I'm saying. I'm way out of it. I think one of the impacts, good or bad, of recent current Star Wars and Marvel is publishers looking for franchise stories now. Yeah, and that's which could be why some sci-fi series might be getting longer.
It's the reliability, and it's the uncertain market and that kind of thing. It's one of those things, and the trick is to make something interesting out of
that. Though we have had some long sci-fi series that have been around for quite a while, like the Vorkassagan saga and the Honor Harrington series.
Yeah, that's Weber, isn't it?
Yeah, there's been stuff, but again with TV series, it's just the nature of the beast. I think because the TV series, it's like they just want to continue on and on and on with things, and that's where I'll always go back to Babylon 5, because it was never meant to continue on.
But if we talk about Babylon 5 is quite complex. There's loads of different.
It is, yeah, and that's why it's an outlier, because it's and that's where I can see that it's not going to have the popularity of Star Wars, of Star Trek, because those things do not have the complexity of those things, and most people don't want complexity. And I think most people that read and most people that read science fiction don't really want complexity either. But it's nice to have both, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What's Freeman here saying about the Expanse books? All 9 Expanse books are wonderful. The TV show was entertaining, but had to truncate many plot. Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it would have taken 10 seasons.
It is harder on TV. It is definitely harder on TV to put that much dedication, because so much of the complexity in books is the stuff that's between the dialogue, and ultimately TV is about dialogue. So you're not going to have loads of voiceovers, are you? Which is what you'd need probably to get the kind of depth you get in books.
But I always sort of figure that there's always things. This is what I have sort of come to, is that there's things, and it's not a big revelation at all. It's not. It's just that there's things that you can do in a book that you can't do in a film, and there's things in a film that you can't do in a book. Simple as that. But you've got something that's really in depth in a book that you can't do in a film. So what do you do? And I think the really good directors and filmmakers will create something else that stands in for that, but is as complex and that. But that takes a very talented writer and a talented director. And most directors and most writers for films and TV are not that talented. They are, I guess you could say, hacks. They are not that talented.
Well, TV has become like the new cinema in a lot of ways, and there are some really, really creative.
There is. It's by virtue, I think, of so much of it.
But also the budgets have got bigger. The time taken to do things, the actors they get to be in these shows have been much better. The TV has become. People talk about a golden age of TV, and there are so many series. It's hard to keep up with it. There's so many new series out there that are really high quality that you got to try and catch up on. So, I think it's not as much that the medium is bad. I think the medium is different, and there's some amazing stuff coming out of that medium.
Yeah, well, there could be. I don't know most of the TV shows that's coming out, so I can't speak for those. But
if you compare, because we talked about Battlestar Galactica, didn't we? You compare the remake that Ronald Moore did. Ronald Moore's remake of Battlestar Galactica was so complex. It was incredible, and I mean, I was gutted by the last episode. I thought it was a real shame, the last episode. But so much of it had so much depth to it and so much power. It was so powerful, and you can't say that about the original series. I loved the original series when I was a kid, but it was just pew 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 sort of program.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Yeah, but I don't. It's weird because I have not watched the reboot of it. It's because
so good.
I like the original series so much, knowing that it's with all its faults. I like it so much.
No, I like it too. But the new one is just insanely professional. Just so much more mature, and there's so much to it. Yeah.
Here's like Scott is saying that.
Scott's right.
Yeah.
Right.
But the thing is, but it does take a talented screenwriter, I think, and a director to bring something that you can't put on film. So therefore you do something different.
It's all about getting the essence of it. If you think about Stories of Your Life, by Ted Chiang, and think about Arrival, quite different experiences, but you can see it's an adaptation of the same story.
Yeah, I have not read that or watched it yet, but that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. If they get that done, and another one that I hold up a lot is because I think of it is The Innocents. We're not talking science fiction here, but just talking about the way that it's done. The Henry James Turn of the Screw. There's so much in there that you can't do in film, but the Truman Capote and the director worked together and created something different, but it, like you say, it had the essence, it had the feel, and it was so good in that way.
And you get people like Alan Moore, who doesn't have any respect for the film medium, and it's a shame because he's got some great ideas, and if he actually worked with filmmakers, it could be some interesting things come out of that.
Yeah, well, I don't know that one. The only one that I really know is the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and the film was crap.
But if he got involved, if he knew about it and said, "Yeah, I'll do that with you," it would probably be completely different. Do you know what I mean? But he's got no respect for the film medium. He thinks it's like, no, my stories cannot be in films.
Yeah, no, it's just like Scott is saying that they're different skill sets, but I think it comes down to that, and the good thing is today is, well, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. There's so much, I think there's so much good stuff out there, but it's to winnow through the other stuff to find it.
Yes and no, because if we talk about books, then usually the stuff that's really good does get talked about. But it's being talked about in the same breath as the stuff that's a bit more pulpy.
Yeah, but that's the thing, because every time I look at something new, and I've looked at science fiction, getting back to science fiction of stuff that people think are good, and I just look at it, and I've looked at it, and it's like, I don't get it. You know, and it's the they talk about depth, but the stuff, like, that's why I sort of pulled back from it, because when I was looking at stuff like 5 or 6 years ago, contemporary science fiction, when I started getting back into reading a little bit of science fiction, I grabbed a few new books or newer books based on what people were saying about how deep this is, and I just thought they were so shallow.
Have you got an idea of what that might have been? Do you remember anything, what any of them were?
Oh, not off the top of my head. But I did find things like Alice. I read some Alistair Reynolds, which I did like. I did like his stuff.
If you compare Alistair Reynolds to Edgar Rice Burroughs, they're leagues apart, aren't they?
Oh yeah.
Alistair Reynolds is much deeper than Edgar Rice Burroughs.
Yeah, and it's but the thing is, that's what I was saying before, that I still enjoy stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs. I can still watch these TV shows. Like, I watched The Expanse and enjoyed it, but I felt cheated because I felt that there was potential there that they didn't fulfill. Other ones, it's not. They don't have any potential. You just go with it, and it's fun, and that's it.
Yeah. But if you read, I mean, you know, if you didn't like it, you didn't like it. But if you like Edgar Rice Burroughs' kind of pulpy science fiction, and then you read something recently that you felt was quite shallow, it's just interesting that you went, "Oh, that's crap because it's shallow." Whereas the older shallow stuff, you go, "Well, that's brilliant, even though it's shallow." Do you know what I mean? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I do know that. It's like, the thing is, I can accept poor writing in older stuff, but I find it difficult to accept in newer stuff, because there was a reason, I think, that was done, because if it's pulpy stuff, there was a reason for that, because they were writing for the half penny or the penny per word and on a deadline. But today, that's not really the case.
Okay, so you give it the benefit of the doubt, sort of thing.
Sorry?
So you give it like the benefit of the doubt. You just think, "Oh, well, they're doing that because that too," sort of thing.
Yeah, to a certain extent, and I do enjoy it. But like I'm saying, like, I might find it crap. I might enjoy it, but I guess what I'm really hoping for is to find something new, like another Dune or another Hyperion. That's what I'm really hoping for, and I think there might be one that I haven't read yet. Is Perdido Street Station? That might be something, and I do want to get into that.
I don't know if this is a good comparison. Maybe someone can make a comment about whether this is a good comparison. But maybe a modern equivalent of Dune might be the Culture series by Ian M. Banks.
I do like Ian M. Banks. I've not read that. See, that's the thing. There are authors that I like, so that's potential. And another one is it
very, very, very multi-layered, and there's all sorts going on. And
is it Neil Stevenson?
Oh yeah.
That, because I have read something of it. See, there. I'm sure there are some things out there that will do that. And the thing is, and also too, the contradiction that I'm saying that I accept it in old stuff and don't accept it in new stuff, is that the old stuff too is short, and I'm more comfortable with that. If I want to read I want to read something just for the thrill of it, I'd prefer to reread or read some of the old stuff than anything new. Right. But I want, so for the new stuff, I really want more depth to it, you know, unless somebody comes out, like people are tired of hearing me talk about Clifford Simak, but it's like, and people say, well, so you think he's the best science fiction writer? No, not at all. I don't think he's the best science fiction writer. I just love the way he does his stuff. It's like, you know, Ray Bradbury is not the best science fiction writer and anything. He's very variable, I guess you would say, because he wrote so much.
But it is utterly subjective, isn't it? It's completely about how the prose style suits the way you read and the way you think.
Exactly.
You know?
And
I want to keep giving Samuel Delaney a go, even though every time I'm like, what are you on about? You know, far. You know what I mean? But I'm still going to give him a go because I know how important he is. You know?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and that's where, like, Ray Bradbury works for me in a way that Clifford Simak works for me. Samuel R. Delaney does not work for me in the same way as you say because of the language, but it works for me intellectually and to try to figure out what he's talking about. And what's coming up too, I'll plug Brandy's the book Eclectic, is Hal Clement, the Hal for the Season. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is just fantastic. He's a perfect example of a hard science fiction writer, but his style of writing doesn't suit me as much as Clifford Simak. But the world building and everything is so much better. His plots sometimes aren't the greatest, or the character, there's not a whole lot of character development, but everything comes out of, I guess, the world building, the science. Everything else comes out, the plot, the characters come out of that. They feed from that. See, people like, I think, Ray Bradbury and Clifford Simak is different. You've got the characters, the story, and the science fiction comes out of the characters. It's the opposite way. I know that sounds weird, but it's
no. I think it's a bit of a shame that the older, like some of the big names in the golden age of science fiction, were terrible at characters, and I think that's such a fundamental part of storytelling that it's just a shame that science fiction ended up getting that reputation. And a lot of authors now will put as much effort into characters as they are about the plot. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's good.
Let's just pause for a second and go to a few comments here. Michael Lombardo said, wait a minute, Steve said the director doesn't matter. Is there, how do you know? Well, see, the thing is, and I think in a lot of films, the directors don't matter. And that's one of the things that I'm saying, that it takes a really good director that to put a vision on something. And I think, and the writer, because I think
it depends on the director. Some directors have had a lot of freedom.
Some
directors have had a lot of pressure from producers and the expectation of if they're working in a franchise, especially. But no, there's loads of auteur directors out there.
Yeah. But the thing is, most of films that put out, even old films, even the stuff that I love watching, the classic films, most of those could have been directed by anybody.
Oh, more importantly, the old ones. There's more.
And now
more
too.
likely to find an auteur now than you would have done in 1950.
Yeah, but a lot of the new stuff, I think, is the same way. But you do get occasionally a director that puts their mark on things. Yeah. Sometimes in not a good way, but sometimes in a very good way. And then Freeman is saying "Children of Time" by Adrian Tchaikovsky. Is what now?
No, that's a really good point. What Freeman said there is a really good point. That Children of Time is just phenomenal. It's absolutely amazing. And I was just okay. I was disappointed by the second book. It was just wasn't as good. It was very similar in tone, but it just didn't grab me as much. The first book is so brilliant, and then now I've heard there's a third one. It's like, oh, okay. It doesn't need to be a trilogy. I mean, he's pumping out books like constantly, and he's got some fantastic. He's a great writer. I think he's really good.
I've not read Children of Time, but I've read other of his stuff, and he's a writer that he's a newer writer that I will look at when I get.
Good. Yeah, he's really good, but it doesn't need to be a trilogy. But there we are. I mean, I think again, I think he's got the freedom to do what he wants in a lot of ways. So you might just want it to be a trilogy, but I think it's a shame.
I hear the Culture series is great in that every book is unique and it avoids being the same.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of, one of the most cerebral examples of that kind of literate science fiction, I think, from what I gather. I've got them all, but I haven't read them yet. But that's what I get. That's the impression I get.
And he's saying that he's got the Adrian Tchaikovsky.
I'm
not sure what. Michael Lombardi says Sean wants more traffic. You should read a new Cormac book. You've got 2 out.
There's 2 Cormac books coming out. Yeah. I still need to read Blood Meridian. I haven't read it yet. I was supposed to read Blood Meridian in the June on the Range, and I haven't read that yet.
Yeah, but it's. And then, let's just go back here. Something that Spammer says: skill is not subjective, taste is subjective. Yeah,
that's a reference to something we said a minute ago. When did we say subjective?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about the prose style.
Yeah.
And absolutely. And you can say that but I don't know, because some people would say that something's badly written, and then someone else, it absolutely suits their taste.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
think
guess
they're a bit interchangeable.
Yeah. I see. The thing is, for me, it's the type of thing that there is, if you're not using, okay, you obviously know things are bad. Like I've picked up a few things that were self-published and looked at it, and there is bad grammar. Like, I mean, extremely bad grammar, not in the people talking, or just look at 50 Shades of Grey. You know that's bad. You may enjoy it.
Yeah, there's
but
a level. There's a level.
Yeah,
There's a
yeah.
level.
But then
If
you
can't
get somebody
spell,
like Samuel R. Delaney, going back to it, where, like I say, he starts the Dahlgren in the middle of a sentence, and then he ends with the beginning of the sentence. It's like, is that bad writing?
Yeah, exactly. That's a decision he's made. So it's a skill thing.
Yeah.
But it's also going to affect someone's taste, isn't it? And they might
Yeah,
think,
it's going to, yeah, definitely, because you may not like that kind of thing of trying to piece these things together, and the sentence fragments. And I don't always like that, but occasionally I like that little bit of mental thing to do. But then I will go back to people that I like Clifford Simak, or Ray Bradbury. Like, I could pick up at any time Martian Chronicles, and most of the stories in there I can just float away on them because of the way he writes, and some of his other stuff. Not everything he writes, because he wrote so much, and even like, I'm not saying Clifford Simak, every story that he wrote was perfect, but when I do read his stuff, I get that feeling. I don't get that feeling from the prose of Samuel R. Delaney, but I get something else. And I think that's the thing. You get other things.
Yeah.
What else is here? The culture books are amazing. Hi, Matt. He's well, you know Matt. And I love his channel. If anybody's watching and he not subscribed to Science Fiction Reads, do it. Which I like. Like, I like people who if they just read old classic science fiction, I might like them. There's a good chance. But he reads everything. But the stuff that he reads, I think a lot of it is the quality stuff. It's like, it's the cream. It's the cream layer. Which is nothing wrong with like I'm saying, with the fluff. Can be.
I mean, one of the things about being on BookTube and hearing recommendations, so much stuff is recommended. It's actually sometimes you don't have time to read the stuff that's not recommended.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and that's where, like I say, I'm in a reread phase, and I don't know when I'll get out of that. I'm rereading everything. Even Scott says that Matt's is a great channel. And I'm in a reread phase, and I'm reading a lot of crap, and I know that. I read a lot of crap.
Well, I mean, because I'm doing this thing in December, this Philip K. Dick thing in December, I know that some of the ones I'm going to read, I don't hear about hardly at all, if at all. There's definitely a few that I've never heard mentioned on YouTube. So I'm looking forward to the fact that I'm going to read and talk about something that I feel like doesn't get talked about a lot. Because sometimes you can just bang on about the same books, can't you?
Yeah. Well, that's usually what happens with authors. Like, somebody was just made some comments about another author that came up in one of my Desert Island books. But it's no, I'm not going to put that one up. Well, I will. Okay, let's pass on. Where was I? I'm not sure where I was.
You now distracted.
Yeah. Oh, I think it was, it's the same stuff from the same authors all the time that you see, and that's where, like, for the Hell for the Holidays and for this one, like, I always, like, for a lot of these things, I go back to the older stuff, because a lot of the older stuff isn't doesn't get a look in very often.
I know. I've said the opposite. Almost all of what I see on BookTube, unless I deliberately not look for it, the stuff that naturally comes up is all the classics, all the stuff in the golden age. People are always talking about Asimov, always talking about, Arthur C. Clarke and Heinlein. They're always talking about them.
Yeah,
Dune,
no, those authors. But
you look for a book review of Dune, it won't take you very long. There's millions of them.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
There's favorites.
What I'm trying to do is get the ones like you're saying that aren't talked about, like the Philip K. Dick ones, and
Al Clement as well. Al Clement is definitely not talked about as much, to be fair.
Yeah, no, he's not. He's not. And Simak is. I'm beginning to see a few things, but Simak isn't hugely talked about.
No, he's not. He's not.
And next year I will be doing something, and that's the thing. Like I stopped basically in the early 90s at some point. After reading Hyperion, I stopped reading science fiction more or less. After reading Hyperion, because it was so good, and I tried a few other things, and I would never find anything. I then, when the other volumes came out, I read them. But all that time, I switched to the history of science fiction. That's what really made me interesting, and I delved into the history of science fiction. And then around 2015, 14, I tried some of the new stuff that I said, and I tried in a few, like I wouldn't say a lot, like I might have tried 10 or 15 authors, and I only found a few that I liked, like the Tchaikovsky,
Adrian Tchaikovsky,
and Neil Stevenson. Who was the other one that we were? Ian M. Banks. Like there's a few that I kind of liked, but for the majority, there might have been 5 that I liked, and then I dropped it again, and it was only the last couple of years, but it was only because I started doing rereading, and that's the thing. But I'm trying to get out of that a little bit, and I do want stuff.
Read what you want to read.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what I'm doing now, and some of it will be the same. But yeah, like Way Station is an underrated. It's amazing. It is, and apparently, is it Netflix or somebody's making? They're doing a film of it, but they're calling it a thriller.
I haven't read it yet, so I don't know how outrageous that is. I've got it because you saw that I bought a bunch of Simak books. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, no, it is amazing because it's got a lot. Like again, it's got a lot of ideas in it as well in the background. That's the one thing. Simak has lots of ideas, but he doesn't. They're not in your face. They're there in the background, and they make you think. Like after they make you think after you've read it, you start realizing these things about politics or religion and things like that. And he that's what I think is great. But it's the story, like it's so comforting to me. Like when you read A Way Station, you're immersed in that countryside. You're immersed in with Enoch Wallach. You are immersed with him, and it's again these different layers. And I think some of them have, but it's different layering than say that what Dan Simmons did it in Hyperion. I don't think Simak or a lot of the writers. I don't even think Asimov could never have written Hyperion. I don't think so. He, like, Asimov does have some interesting and deep things, but he really didn't. He developed that later. Anyway, let's see. Spaminator's example. Henry James was an objectively skilled writer. Deployed. See, that's the thing. I do like his prose. That's the thing. Yeah, and he is objectively a skilled writer. But yeah, then it comes down to, do you like it or not? That it goes back to that whole thing. Scott, if you're still there, like, what do you think? Like, you're saying it's Way Station, you like it. What do you like about it the most? What's that? But yeah, I was just curious to see what Scott why he liked Way Station. What have you read of Simak? Let's end it on Simak.
Who, me?
Yeah.
So I read Time and Again, and I know in the past I've read some short stories, but I can't remember what they are. So I've recently bought about 8 books by him, and Way Station is definitely top of the list. But I've only really read Time and Again and something that I can't remember. So yeah, I'm relatively new, but I loved Time and Again. I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. So you've never read City? You've never read City?
Oh no, sorry, no, I've read City. City was better than Time and Again. I have read City. Sorry. Yeah.
City is better than Time and Again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you? I'm just curious. What do you like about City? What was the thing?
Probably the ideas. I don't think it's necessarily. I don't know that it was the way he wrote. I think it's more his ideas, which is interesting because that wouldn't have necessarily sold it. So clearly there was something about the way he wrote as well. If it's just ideas, I'll get a little bit fed up with it. But if it's great characters and just a style of writing, the flow of the writing, then that will get me. But I did like City a lot, so it must be in there as well.
Yeah. I like it so much. I've reread it probably 20 some 30 or 50 times. I don't know how many times. And it's, to me, that's, and it's subtly complex. It's subtly complex.
It is, but it is easy to read in the sense that, because I'm going to reread Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep in December, part of the Philip K. Dick thing. And I know he's not particularly easy to read, but Simak is easy to read. Definitely.
Yeah. And it's partially because of the structure that he did in the book. The stories by themselves don't have the impact separately as they do with the interlinear introductions. That takes it to another level, and you can look at it this way, and then you can look at it this way, and then you can look at it this way. And because you can look at it from the dog's point of view, you can look at it from the human's point of view, you can look at it from Jenkins' point of view.
And
Jenkins,
I think Jenkins was the most interesting character in it.
Oh yeah, that to me is I think he's one of the best robots that has ever been created. Even though he's like other people are saying, oh well, he's just a servant. He's just like
Well, he's central to the book, though.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, because he does so much. Hi, Alan.
Hi, Alan.
Let's see here. Scott's come back. It had every emotion. It made me laugh out loud. His aliens were so well thought out. Just a great story done in 200 pages. So yeah, and it's like, to me, it's like I get lost in the countryside. Like that's the one thing that it's like people call it Simak country. I've only read Valis.
That's not Simak, is it?
No. I don't know what Valis is.
Can't remember who wrote Valis.
Or is it because he's got it in tight capitals? Is it each letter meaning something? I can't get that out.
Oh, an acronym. Valis.
Oh, Philip K. Dick.
Philip K. Dick. Yeah, Philip K. Dick. That makes sense. I haven't got Valis, but I've got but it'd be interesting to know what you think. Relegated written sound. Oh, it has had an issue. It has created issues.
I wasn't about Joe then, was it?
No. No.
I don't recognize Valis. Sorry.
No. Now I've remembered it's Philip K. Dick. Then it is a big book. It's a very, very.
Is that what it must be? One of his later ones.
I don't know when it came out, but I know that it's one that gets talked about a lot.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Alan says it's a very weird book. Every book is weird.
That's not a surprise, is it? I think it's an interesting question about whether or not the kind of the wonder of cinema takes away people's draw to the written word. I think in general that's kind of happened outside science fiction as well. I think, you know, competing with also the way that people's span of attention has decreased as well. That's kind of scientifically been proven that younger people have got smaller span of attention, takes more of a span of attention to read. So I do think that's part of an issue as well. But I mean, yeah, people are kind of getting trained to not sit down for an hour. And I think that can create an issue with just reading in general.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, with CGI, because people will look at something now and say, "Oh, the effects are so great," and I flash back 40 years ago and saying the same thing of something I watched, but you watch it now.
Yeah, but because it's photo real, they go, "What's the point of me reading it? I can just look at it." So it does become more. It does become more competitive, doesn't it? So I do get why it's happened. It's a shame, but there is some of that going on.
Yeah, but but that's the thing, and it is a shame, I think, because when you've got the film and TV and all this stuff, you rarely get the real depth to it. Like I think it's rare for the number of shows that are out there. There are some really good ones. Like, well, just going to something, I've never really read this writer at all. Neil Gaiman. I've never really read much of Neil Gaiman, or hardly anything. But I started watching on Prime American Gods, and I thought, this is warped. But all of a sudden it clicked after the first episode. It clicked, and I go, this is brilliant.
I don't know if you want to try him, because actually you can really tell that he's influenced by Bradbury, and because you like Bradbury so much, you might like him.
I do have American Gods in book somewhere. I picked it up. I think as a remainder, as on some site, I needed to add an extra 2 pounds or something like that, and so that filled the void.
Yeah, I think it's great.
That there's no special effects in there. David Copperfield, but it's fabulous. It's fabulous in its own way. The merging of science fiction and horror always gets to me. I have no mouth, and I must scream. It's one of the most terrifying works of fiction I've ever read. That's another thing. Like I could argue, because see, to me,
I read that when I was a teenager.
Sorry,
I read that when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
Harlan Ellison's always been in my life as a reader.
Yeah, I have been ambivalent about him. I like stuff that I've read, and I've never read anything. I've never read, or I should say, everything that I've read has not turned me off him, but it hasn't pulled me to read more. If you know what I mean, it's like, yes, I like that, but there was just nothing. When I say nothing, there wasn't anything there that drew me in for some reason, and I don't know why.
Every time I read something, but my favorite, by the way, for anyone commenting, is Repentant Harlequin said the TikTok man. I love that story so much. But every time I read anything by him, there's something about the character of it, his narrative voice, that makes me feel like I've just been on a journey. It's like reading Harlan Ellison. I might remember this when I do a Harlan Ellison video. Reading Harlan, just come to me. Reading Harlan Ellison is like getting in someone's car, and then they start driving 120 miles an hour, and then they park, go around, and get out. It's like that.
Yeah.
And what just happened?
Yeah, no, you've got the 30-year essential, don't you? I think.
Yeah, and the 51. I've got both.
Oh, you got the 50-year as well. Send me the 50-year. Because I've been looking for one or the other, and I prefer the 50-year one, and that's where I want to delve back into Harlan Ellison, is that way, because I think that's the best way to do it.
It's about 150 pages or something that's extra.
Yeah,
I think so.
Yeah, it's like I'd even be happy with, but they're just so expensive. But yeah,
he's just such an interesting character. That's why this is another video that we can do if you still want me back. The question of divorcing the work from the author, he I think it's over exaggerated how nasty he was, because I don't think he was nasty, he was just controversial. But that could be enough to make people think I'm not going to read him. And I just think his work, you can hear the personality in his narrative voice, but it's that kind of cocky personality that you can read in the prose. I think it's really interesting, And when someone is writing like that, it's just so unusual. Anyway, I've got to go really because it's now 2.5 hours, and Mark thought I had enough of this, and probably everyone else has. I need to see my mum.
Yeah, no, it's longer than I was expecting, about an hour longer. But it was fun, and even the dust up was fun.
We weren't actually disagreeing much, by the way, but it's cool. It's cool. Maybe you'll watch it back, and I'll go, I'm not disagreeing. I don't know. But no, I love chatting to you, Shawn, and I'm really grateful that you brought me on, and I'm grateful to the commenters as well. Obviously, a lot of them I knew.
May the spam be with you.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.